Good afternoon. My name is Chioma Fanawopo, and today I'll be sharing on the recent events with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, but also racism here in the UK. So other action points are unconscious bias. I really believe that, one, we are all part of the human race. And so, as I say to my children, when we bleed, the blood that we bleed are not white or black, it's red. So we are all part of the human race, and we all need to identify, one, we are all part of the human race. And I think COVID has shown us that as a community, if we come together for the good of the community, we can really work together and support fellow human beings. We saw the whole NHS workers being clapped for and acknowledged, but actually what we saw in the media and the way it was reporting of the NHS was that we didn't see a representation of BAME or Black and ethnic minority doctors who represent 40% of the NHS. But what we saw were a lot of doctors and nurses. I mean, I, for one, know a lot of family members who work in the NHS. My mom, she's a nurse. And during this COVID, she supported and helped to support and care for patients. My sister, she's a pharmacist, again, working on the front line. And I've got cousins who are doctors working for the NHS, who are, again, helping in that fight. But I don't think the contributions of these people have been acknowledged rightly. We were seeing a lot of clapping, but what we were not seeing was a lot of PPE, so personal protective equipment given to those doctors and those professionals to help them in their fight against COVID, which meant that a lot of people were disproportionately died because they were right on the forefront, but were not given the right tools. And then back to immigration again, we saw that a lot of the NHS workers who were migrants had to pay a surcharge for the same NHS that they worked for, which in itself is an unfair system. Also, I mentioned unconscious bias. I think we all inherently as people have unconscious bias, and the key thing is to first identify our unconscious bias, that we have it, and then choose to ensure that our experiences, we do not treat people differently based on how they look and what they look like, but get to know people. And so that's what I've done myself personally, and I will encourage people to do the same. Make friends with neighbors or people around you that are different and get to learn, because when you do, you find out that people are people. Young people are the same, go through the same hormones, go through the same issues around adolescent development, risk-taking behavior that their counterparts do. But by learning to have people of different nationalities and races, you realize that we're all the same and we're all human beings. And know that we are all part of the human race. And so, key steps: education, identify unconscious bias, and choosing to create opportunities for those who might not. But also, the impact of racism can be trauma, where I was just speaking to the young lady I was speaking to. She said she has something called the imposter syndrome, where she doesn't feel she's good enough, right? She's an amazing practitioner. She's a speech and language therapist. She's an amazing practitioner. But because of not being believed, not being felt that, not because of not being believed, one, but also not made to feel that she had something positive to contribute, she doubts herself. And it means that now she no longer wants to use her voice. So some of the impact of racism is that people don't believe in themselves. They lose confidence in themselves. While she's an amazing professional who has a lot, I think over 10 years of professional practice that she has to offer. So I think we need to do more to believe the stories of people that we hear. When people say, it's not for us to get defensive, it's not an attack on you, we can choose to be anti-racist by listening to those stories, taking it on board and choosing to do better. I remember working with a colleague, a white colleague, and she said her sister had just adopted a mixed race girl, and they were really finding it difficult to find dolls that represented this young girl positively. So they've gone into toy shops and they couldn't find something that made her proud of who she was. And she said, I would not have known that if my sister hadn't adopted this girl. And it really showed that, and think about it the next time you go into shops, think of the access that you have to dolls that look like you, but how many dolls do we have that look different to ourselves? Black dolls or Asian dolls, because that is an issue. The other thing I was reminded of is a young lady that I know. She's 21 and she's a ballet school, and she says she's found it so difficult to find ballet shoes that match her color. So what she has to do is purchase her ballet shoes and then paint it with foundation to get the right color. Also the same as skin color tights. If you go to Boots or Superdrug or wherever you buy your tights from Tesco, when you see nude, the nude is not for darker skin. So she has to really pay so much more to get them either shipped from the States or pay more to have them made for her. And she said it's made her really conscious, because she said in ballet, being able to have things that match you, help you to blend, and helps your dance better. But she's really struggled with having that. And then another, and I'll give my own personal example, makeup that I use for my skin. I can't go to Boots to buy. And I remember when I went with my colleague, we went makeup shopping. I couldn't find the right colors to suit my skin tone in Boots, or even right haircare products. And it's something that we take so lightly. Like, you might go into Boots or Superdrug to get your haircut. I can't. I mean, thankful recent times we've had people like organizations like Afrocentrics start to sell products, and they're stocking in Whole Foods shops and Holland and Barrett's, which is really amazing because they're catering for the Black market. Now, historically, that market has not been catered for. And I'll give another personal example. I remember on a work trip, I went to Glasgow. And at the airport, I went to the MAC counter because I do buy some of my makeup from there. And when I've gone in, because it's Glasgow, the shades of foundation were pale and very pale and beige. There was no dark skin color foundation range. And I thought to myself, gosh, those people, Black women that live here in Glasgow, they must have to either shop online or come into London just to buy the products that they need. And it highlighted that. And it's something that you probably never think about because it doesn't affect you. But I really got excited when I got to that airport. I thought, yeah, I'm going to buy some duty-free makeup. But when I went, I couldn't find my color. And so think of the frustration for people who can't find the right suitable products to suit their skin. Another one is plaster. I mean, recently, and I think this might be just in America, think of plaster, you get skin color types. Many people like us, our plaster that we get doesn't suit our skin color. And I know sometimes people might say that provides an opportunity for us to create those products, but it's something that's never been talked about. But I've even also heard stories of how the new iPhone doesn't recognize some of the owners because they're dark and because it wasn't tested with dark customers. Or even we see that in technology where AI, artificial intelligence, hasn't been tested. Some of the products haven't been tested with Black skin. So we've heard stories of people that have gone to the toilet and the taps won't open for them because their skin color doesn't match. When you wave your hand in the air, because it's not been tested with darker skin, the taps don't open. Now, some people might describe that as race baiting, but if you have your own phone, your iPhone that you've purchased, that would not unlock because your skin is darker, because it hasn't been tested with darker consumers in mind. Or as I said, the tap's not functioning because it hasn't been tested. I think it's important for us going forward to really think about the products that we make. Is it catering to all skin type? And this is where diversity and inclusion is important. That you have people representative on boards who can speak out and think of that, because you might not even think about it because it doesn't affect you. But if you have a Black and a minority ethnic person on the board, then they might say, have you thought about the Black audience? Have you thought about how this might affect people in that community? But by having people, rather than just a token, then it's important that it's done to represent the diverse needs of multicultural London that we live in, or multicultural society that we live in. And I'll share another example. Last year, I went to speak and share some of my work working for a charity at a church. And I remember a lady came up to me, older lady in her 70s, and she shared a story with me that I think reflects how people treat people. And I think it is a fear of the unknown. She said to me, she said, Chioma, I've really got a story to share with you. I was like, okay, great, share on. And she said, myself and my husband, we have a grandson who came to us and said, Grandma and Granddad, I would love you to meet my a girlfriend of mine that I'd love to marry. And they said, yeah, bring her on. And he said, I really want you to know she is Black. And the grandma said to me, when she heard that, her heart sank. And she thought, oh dear. And she said she gave the girl a really hard time. One, because she was Black. But again, it's back to what I was saying as about unconscious bias, because she thought that because she was Black, they've never had a Black member of the family. She said, I gave her a really hard time, and I'm really sorry I did. But thankfully, she took time to know her, and she found out that she's a wonderful granddaughter-in-law. They did get married, and she said, I'm really sorry I gave her a hard time, because as I got to know her and her family, I realized they were an amazing family. But it's that fear of the unknown that made her react differently to her and give her a really difficult time. But thankfully, she turned things around. She got to know her, and she found that she was amazing. And I shared this story to share that those are some of the experiences that people, Black people, have found where people have not taken time to get to know them, and they've really reacted differently to them. But on getting to know them, they realize that they're just like every normal young lady, and her family are just like every normal family. So going forward, take time to get to know people, and you'll find out that we're just human beings at the end of the day, and we are part of the human race. And really excited that recent events have made us start to, for the first time, acknowledge people's experiences, choose to want to learn, and choose to want to do better. And when you are in a position of influence, make a decision to amplify the voices of those who are underrepresented, create opportunities to those who might not have those opportunities, and choose to do something differently where you are in a position to do so. And like I mentioned, my young people, and this is why I love young people and I advocate for them, because I just think they're part of the change that we need in our society. So they're making changes. Some of them, we saw them at the Black Lives Matter protest. Why I don't condone some of the riots and some of the looting that is taking place, but it's because people are angry at the injustice that they've suffered at the hands of the police for generations and for decades. And another young person that I know, she grew up in a very privileged background. She decided to write her final year dissertation about the refugee experiences and how more people need to be open to refugees, and actually learned that a lot of refugees find themselves in that position because unfortunately it was the only option and the only alternative to go through a really difficult, perilous journey to get to safety here in the UK. And so we need to do more to accept refugees and migrants who are fleeing either persecution. I mean, I remember meeting a young man who fled his hometown of Eritrea at the age of 14, and his family paid for him to be smuggled out of his home country. Now he left, his dad paid because he knew that if he didn't pay for his son to leave, he was going to be conscripted into the army at age 14 and be in the army service with really harsh conditions. And so he made the journey of leaving his hometown, going through the Sahara Desert at age 14. At the time, I had a 14-year-old, and I thought, gosh, as a mother, would I have let my 14-year-olds go through that journey? But I think his dad did, because he knew that if his son wasn't taken out of the country, he was going to be conscripted and he will go through harsh military service. But also, in some of those services, some of the young people actually do die. So he made that difficult decision. And this boy, young man, he's now 28 today, and he says, I went through the Sahara Desert, I went through Libya, and he said, and I got onto some of those boats that we saw coming into Greece and in Europe. and I had to scramble and get on. And then I ended up in Calais. And in Calais, I saw some horrendous things. I saw, as a young man, people die in those camps because they didn't have enough food. And there was a lot of disease that was rife in those camps. And then he said, I made the treacherous journey from Calais into the UK on one of those lorries that we saw last year when those Vietnamese people sadly died in that lorry. And he said, I was one of those. And then what it showed is that people only make those journeys unless they're absolutely desperate to get to a better life. And he hasn't seen his family for the last 14 years, but he's thankful that he's in a safe place, and which now makes him speak out about his experiences to raise awareness that he did not make that journey and his parents did not pay for him to come out of his country of their own because it was the right, because it was they did it because it was the only thing they could do for their son to make sure that he stayed alive. And so I want to encourage you today to look at yourself and say, okay, how can I be anti-racist? Because it's not enough not to be racist, but it's anti-racist in the things you say, in the things that you do. Educate those around you who might hold certain prejudice. And if you do, like we all do, check yourself and check, I have privilege. How can I help those that are less privileged than myself? I said it could be making opportunities. I know this story that went viral 2 years ago, a young man called Reggie Nelson. He had grown up with his mom, and when he was about 17, he heard that the richest street in London was Kensington. So he decided to knock on doors and find out what people did to get to where they were, because he wanted to better himself. And he knocked on a few doors, got a few funny, people didn't open doors, but finally one particular woman did, and she invited him in and listened to him. And when her husband came home, she said to him, I'd really like you to mentor this young man. And he did. And this young man was about to go to university. And this, I think it was I can't remember his job, but he was a top, he owned a firm in London. And he was able to give this young man opportunity. And he advised him on his university courses and things to study, but also offered him work experience during the summer holidays. That was a small step that he did, but he has changed the trajectory of that young man's life forever. And that young man today got to meet Theresa May, who was a former prime minister and has had many opportunities, but he said it was because that man gave him opportunity. And so I encourage everyone today who's listening to this, how can you use your privilege to help young people, to help people around you who might not have the same privilege? I myself know that there were different opportunities I would have had, but unfortunately, due to my race, due to my gender, due to that intersectionality between race and gender, I haven't had many opportunities. But I'm thankful that today I know that I have people that have said, Chioma, we're going to support you, we're going to get alongside you, and we're going to help you and give you that platform that you might not have had. And so I will say, champion people, help those who might not be in the same position as you to help them get to where they are, because by so doing, you are helping yourself. And there's that feeling that comes from helping people, that you feel so good about yourself. And it's great for our mental well-being as well. And finally, making opportunities and giving opportunities to people that don't look like you, not just to fill a quota, but because you really genuinely care and want to hear about their needs. And using your platform to amplify the voices of those people. And this is why we say Black Lives Matter. It's not because all lives don't matter, because we believe all lives matter, but because Black people are more likely to be killed because of police brutality, even here in the UK and in the States, like we saw. And Black people have been, stopped and searched disproportionately. That's why we say Black Lives Matter. And someone described it perfectly, a young person. She said, it's like, and I've seen this also on social media, if your house is burning, and your neighbor comes and saying, why is everyone concentrating the effort on this house? that is burning. I say, but my house matters too. Of course, you're not saying your neighbor's house doesn't matter, but you're saying my house is the one that is on fire right now. Your house is fine, so we don't need to focus on it. But mine is on fire. I think we all need help to quench that fire, to put out the fire. We need help to call the fire service to come out. It's not saying that your house doesn't matter. It's saying it does, but this house at the moment is on fire, and the fire needs to be quenched. And I hope that's a good illustration of why we say Black Lives Matter. Not that other people don't matter, because don't forget we're part of the human race, but it's that right now, Black lives are not as important and needs to be made important, because we are all made in the image of God, and we are all part of the family of God, and we're all human beings, and we all bleed red, and we all have the same needs and the same wants, which is food, security, and shelter. And I think COVID has shown us that at the heart of everything, when everything's taken away, what's important is food. Do we have enough food? As we saw in the early days of before even lockdown, people buying, people going crazy, fighting each other over the last toilet roll. We've all seen that. Food, accommodation, shelter, and security. And that, and we have that through our family and the community around us. Thank you, and that's my point of view. And this is Chioma, youth minister, youth practitioner for over 18 years, mother of boys, passionate about young people, passionate about community, passionate about seeing people work together because we are stronger together rather than segregated and apart. Passionate about seeing change.